Thanks for coming today. I've got a couple of special briefers to start us off with today. I'd like to welcome Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment, Kathy Novelli, who I think you all know, as well as our Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Danny Russell, who I also think you all know very well. They're going to open up today's briefing with some comments and a little bit of a preview about the strategic and economic dialogue that the Secretary will be participating in early next week in Beijing, and then they'll stay around, take a couple of questions, and then we'll get to the daily briefing after that. So, with that, I'm going to first introduce Assistant Secretary of State Russell.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kathy. I'll try to provide a little context on what will be our 8th strategic and economic dialogue taking place in Beijing, June 5th through 7th. The strategic track, again, will be led by Secretary Kerry. The economic track will be led by Secretary of the Treasury, Jack Lew. I'll also say a word or two about some of the associated dialogues, the strategic security dialogue and also the consultation on people-to-people exchange. And then Undersecretary Novelli will cover the economic and the environmental parts of the equation. So the SNED really is the flagship dialogue or annual mechanism for connecting the work of our two governments. And over the last 8 years, we've used it to do two things. One, to set the goals and the direction of the relationship. But secondly, to help us work through and absorb some of the shocks to the system allowing our teams to talk through, to think through, and to work through real problem areas. The SNED is one of the instruments that's helped us put a floor under the U.S.-China relationship capable of absorbing stress, but also serving as a foundation for practical progress. It also, because it's an annual high-level meeting, serves as a kind of action forcer in terms, or a deadline, to galvanize our bureaucracies to reach agreement on things that they've been discussing. It's helped to germinate some new areas of collaboration and to tee up accomplishments that can be brought across the finish line when our two presidents meet. There is, in my view, huge value in this institutional mechanism. It brings together on a regular basis, predictable basis, not only two cabinet secretaries from the U.S. side, but representatives of multiple agencies, leading staffers covering a broad spectrum of our interests. Specifically, the strategic track of the SNED, I think, has demonstrably contributed to real accomplishments in the U.S.-China relationship over the last 8 years. One of the most visible examples of that being on climate change. I think it helped foster the cooperation that in the P5+6 led to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. It is certainly an element behind the cooperation that's culminated in the toughest ever sanctions on North Korea. It's helped us build a improved and stable military-to-military relationship with China, led to cooperation in fighting infectious diseases and pandemics like Ebola, in expanding Chinese support for peacekeeping and for our cooperation in Afghanistan and other global hotspots. At the same time, it served as a venue that allows us to discuss and in some cases to narrow our differences. And that includes our concerns with Chinese behavior in the South China Sea, our concerns with things like the NGO management law and other forms of restrictions on human rights, our concerns about anti-business, discriminatory regulations, and the use of cyber to disadvantage our companies. These are all difficult issues. They're important issues that we address in the SNED and important parts of our effort to manage, if not resolve, problem areas. Now, one of the adjunct meetings that go hand in hand with the strategic track is what we call the Strategic Security Dialogue, the SSD, which is headed on our side by Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken, and it includes representatives from the militaries on both sides, so it's a civilian-military session. This gives us that integrated venue for communication on some of the thorniest strategic issues that we have to contend with. And as in the past, we expect the SSD will engage candidly, constructively on issues like maritime behavior, like cyber, like North Korea, and so on. Concurrent with the SNED, but separate, is an important meeting in its own right, the consultation on people-to-people exchanges, the CPE. That's led on our side also by Secretary Kerry. And we have developed programs, we've expanded programs through the CPE that directly impact our two countries and our two people. More than 30,000 Chinese, for example, studied here in the United States last year. I'm sorry, I misspoke, 300,000 Chinese students were in the U.S. last year, and that's a threefold increase since President Obama took office, and constitutes something on the order of a third of all of our international students. The 1 Million Strong initiative aims at getting 1 million Americans to learn Mandarin Chinese. And there's a variety of other exchanges between young scientists, athletes, artists, and so on. So the CPE is a major driver of our people-to-people ties, which, after all, are a huge investment in the U.S.-China relationship. So you don't need me to tell you how important the U.S.-China relationship is, both to addressing global challenges, but also to the welfare and the economic interests of the United States. But I will turn the floor then now over to Kathy, Undersecretary Novelli. Thanks.
Thanks, Danny. And just as Danny has said, you know, the SNED has actually been a very productive and important bilateral forum for a number of the issues that are the economic, the environment issues. And so we have really been able to use these meetings to come together, and in places where we disagree, to try to have frank discussions and resolve those things, and also figure out how we can work together. And so I thought I would just take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that maybe aren't quite always on the front page, but are very important in terms of issues that we're going to discuss. And the first one is clean energy. The SNED has a real important opportunity for us to build off of the progress that was made in Paris last December at the COP21, because we're the world's two largest emitters of carbon dioxide, but we also accounted for more than half of the record $329 billion in global investment in clean energy in 2015. And so we're going to actually sit down and talk about how U.S. and Chinese experiences can support China's power sector reforms. And the reason why this is important is because it's going to open the way for more market-oriented strategies to increase renewable energy integration into China. We're also going to talk about a number of key issues impacting the environment, and those are going to range from wildlife trafficking and combating that, to ocean conservation, and also to supporting Chinese and American innovators in trying to address a wide array of innovation challenges, including how innovation can help in these areas like wildlife trafficking and ocean conservation. And you may know that the last SNED in Washington set in motion President Obama and President Xi's historic announcement of their commitments mutually to implement near complete bans on ivory imports, exports, and domestic and commercial trade. And this was widely recognized at the time as a game-changing event in the worldwide effort to stop elephant poaching. And in fact, the price of ivory in China has decreased by half since that announcement. So what we're planning to do in the SNED is to talk about how this is going to actually get implemented. The U.S. is getting ready to roll out its regulations that are going to actually put this ban into effect, and we're going to talk with the Chinese about how they're progressing and doing their own regulations, as well as talk about how we can work together with third countries who are facing problems of poaching. We're also going to talk to them about how we can jointly address the urgent threats our ocean faces from man-made pressures, and how we can work together to find solutions to threats like plastic pollution and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. We had a great first session on oceans at our last SNED, and so we're going to build on that for this one. And we're also hoping that we can entice the Chinese to play a more prominent role in our ocean conference that we're going to be hosting here in September, on September 14th or 15th and 16th, because that is a very, very important conference in bringing the world together to combat illegal fishing, to combat pollution of the ocean, and we want China to participate since they are a big ocean state. Another way that we see an opening for greater collaboration is a new dialogue that we're just starting up, which is going to be on aviation-related issues. And there we're going to have representatives from 7 U.S. agencies who have aviation responsibilities, including ourselves at the State Department, to meet with our Chinese counterparts in their interagency to talk about how we can adapt our national aviation systems to meet the needs of the 21st century. And we have, obviously in the U.S., we have experiences from the growth of our own commercial aviation system, and we think that talking with Chinese, that we can convey what our experiences have been. It can benefit China as it expands its own aviation system. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to have some very tangible results of that on a going forward basis. Lastly, we're also going to talk about how we can work to support the science and technology innovations across the board that can provide jobs and improve the quality of life for both of our countries. So we are going to be introducing some of the newest members of our ECHO Partnerships program, which is a fantastic program that supports local and state actors in China and the United States who work together to find technical solutions to environmental challenges. This has been going on for several years, and we'll have a whole new set of ECHO partners that we'll be announcing. So we're going to cover a lot of important ground on the energy, environment, and of course the economic realm. And I think that it speaks to the large relationship that we have. It's a very large and diverse relationship, and we're trying to work together where we can agree, because when we agree, we can have great results and be very constructive. So I thank you very much, and I think we are going to take some questions.
Okay, Matt, start with you.
So, two very
Oh,
brief,
you guys are actually in the hot seats. You got to
just two very brief ones. One, as it relates to North Korea, Danny, this concept the administration has had for years now of strategic patience with the North Koreans, which I guess the Chinese have been on board with and may even have encouraged. I'm just wondering, given the latest missile test, even though it failed, if you and China think that it's worthwhile pursuing that. And then secondly, you mentioned, Kathy, the enticing the Chinese to come to the Oceans Conference. Are they resisting for some reason? And even if they're not, how exactly does one entice China to show up at a conference in Washington?
Well, I'll start on North Korea, Matt. You're reaching pretty far back into the history of our North Korea policy in the first term to come up with strategic patience. I think that was at the time a badly misunderstood concept, and right now I think the phrase that captures our strategy most succinctly is UN Security Council Resolution 2270.
Strategic impatience.
China is a co-author of the toughest sanctions ever levied on North Korea, and by its own declaration is determined to implement them fully. One of the things that we will and do talk about, and the SNED provides a platform for that, is the practical question of how to ensure that the pressure that is built on an international basis on North Korea culminates in the outcomes that we want, which is, as I've said, not to bring North Korea to its knees, but to its senses. And the outcome that we're looking for is North Korean agreement to negotiate the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That's not unconditional surrender. That is a reasonable and consistent objective of ours. We have a vastly improved chance of getting there with China's full cooperation, and we intend to use the SNED to game out how we can speed up the outcome that we're both working to achieve.
So in answer to your question, China, similar to the U.S., has many different agencies who are responsible for everything that touches the ocean. And in the U.S., we have actually pulled together, we have a presidential task force that pulls all of us together to talk about what is our plan for doing this and how are we going to work together, for example, to deal with illegal and unregulated fishing. And China has been in a much more stovepiped situation, and that's why we wanted to start this oceans dialogue. They have participated in a very sort of low level in the last ocean conference, partly because it was sort of a, well, are you doing it or am I doing it type of thing inside their own government. So what we're hoping is that by having this organized dialogue with them, we can pull all their actors at the table at the same time all of ours are, and then we'll be able to kind of map out, here's what we're going to do in the Oceans Conference, and here's how you can actually constructively participate, and so that we can actually get some organization around that.
Thanks for doing this. I was wondering if you could, I can't remember a time that there wasn't like a little bit of tension in advance of one of these SNEDs. And I also think, as you talk about the kind of breadth and depth of the relationship, it's pretty clear that, and I think you've said that there's no issue in the world today in which the U.S. and China aren't cooperating. But I'm wondering, that we've been talking about the tension with China over the South China Sea in recent months, and I'm wondering, to what extent does this kind of tension seep in or hang over the discussions, or do you think that, is there like a kind of gentleman's agreement to, acknowledge that, but put that aside for the type of greater cooperations, or does that tension kind of seep into every little issue where, there's mistrust and acrimony?
I'll give you my experience and turn to Kathy. I think that one of the real accomplishments of the Obama administration with regard to China has been the creation of a relationship that can handle both significant friction and global, if not galactic, scale cooperation. The indicator of health, I think, in the character of the U.S.-China relationship that we've helped to build is the fact that there is so little spillover. So there is no gentleman's agreement to pretend that these problem areas don't exist, nor is there an insurmountable impasse that blocks us from practical cooperation on issues that matter to both our countries and to the world. And getting to that place has been no easy matter, which is why I describe it as a major accomplishment. We have, just taking the SNED as an example, in the strategic track, some small sessions where Secretary Kerry and State Councilor Yang Jiechi can really dig down on the areas where we have some significant friction or significant disagreements, and talk through not just the ritualistic exchange of talking points, but talk through what we are going to do, what it would take, what it is that really matters, and where the problems and the potential for crisis or conflict exist. And that has been one of the secrets of the ability of the U.S. and China to deal with and manage problem areas without coming to blows and without developing the kind of strategic rivalry that creates an absolute Cold War zero-sum dynamic. At the same time as some of the issues that we've both mentioned, including most dramatically on climate change, we've been able to harness the area of common interest and find ways to work together for mutual benefit and for the benefit of the region and the world more broadly, that are independent of the fact that we disagree on problem areas. So what we haven't done is simply paper over the differences in the name of harmony, nor have we allowed a situation to emerge where we have to stand down on our disagreements over Chinese behavior, for example, on human rights, in order to get their cooperation on global issues.
And I would just add to that, I think that, just like we're a big country and we have a lot of diverse things going on in our country, so does China. And so we are able to engage them on all this diversity and really engage in a constructive way, as Danny said. And we really just have not found, and I certainly haven't found, and I lead a number of these dialogues, that there's any real spillover from the South China Sea type of thing. But instead, it's a very much of a practical, how do we roll up our sleeves? We're both interested in protecting our oceans. What do we need to do together? One of the things, for example, there that we're working on is sister marine protected areas, so that they have areas that allow their fish to not be fished, and they're gathering scientific information from it. We have similar ones. How do we kind of exchange our scientific information so we can use that for conservation? And that's in an area that even touches the ocean. So there's a lot that goes on that's constructive.
I don't know, I'm sorry I missed the top of your remarks, but if you didn't, and I don't know if you have that information on you, could you give a little bit of the statistics about the size of the delegation, the amount of cabinet secretaries, how many agencies are represented? That would be really helpful in terms of just showing the kind of breadth and depth of the delegation.
Well, we can get you the actual statistics. I think last year, 20 U.S., something on the order of 20 different departments or agencies were represented in one fashion or another. I think, as Kathy mentioned, the Chinese ministries often have a more stovepipe character to their operations, and we find that the great value comes in bringing them together to meet with our agencies. And but we'll get you some of the stats.
Thanks.
One question on the South China Sea. The president-elect of the Philippines, Mr. Duterte, today was asked about the possibility of bilateral talks with China, and he replied, quote, "We have this pact with the West, but I want everybody to know that we will be charting a course of our own. It will not be dependent on America," close quote. Are you concerned that a new Philippine government may seek to negotiate bilaterally with the Chinese and make, as it were, a separate peace with them on the broader South China Sea, on the South China Sea issues, and therefore make it harder to pursue the kind of multilateral approach that you've talked about?
Well, some of the issues and some of the disputes in the South China Sea are multilateral, and that's not going to change. Some of the issues are, frankly, issues not only among the claimants, including China, but between China and ASEAN, which is made up of 10 members, of which the Philippines is one. And every Philippine government in the last 35 years has been committed to work with and through ASEAN. I've never met anybody who suspected that that was going to change in the next administration. Now, we'll, of course, wait until President-elect Duterte is inaugurated, and we'll have opportunities ourselves to confer with him and with his government. But there's never been a problem or resistance on the part of the U.S. to the idea of bilateral talks among the claimants. Some of the claims are such as to involve just two parties, and in that case, bilateral talks are perfectly fine. And there is a number of instances in which China and one or another claimant has made some headway in bilateral talks. What we have affirmed again and again is that bilateral approach, and certainly bilateral talks in which the smaller party is unwilling, aren't the only avenue to find solutions. And so in addition to the sorts of things that need to be done by all the claimants, in addition to the sorts of things that need to be done with ASEAN, in addition to the right of any party to avail itself of legal mechanisms such as arbitration under the law of the sea, a right that we certainly respect, there is abundant room for direct talks. And that's something that we have no problem with whatsoever. But I think that there are any number of issues that can't be resolved on a bilateral basis, but those that can, we're all for it.
We'll just take one more. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. The first question is for Undersecretary Kathy. So you mentioned the breakthrough from last year on ivory trade. So it seems like it's not an elephant in the room type of issue. Could you please elaborate what is the goal you would like the United States would like to achieve with China, and what is the status of implementation? And then the next question is for Assistant Secretary Danny. So one of the big accomplishments over the last 7 rounds of SNED is the MOU on the confidence building measures, in particular the air-to-air and maritime encounter. So could you please give us a sense where we are, and are those procedures under the MOU are implemented? Thank you.
Well, so on the wildlife trafficking, we have 3 things that we're working on. First is to stop the killing, stop the poaching. Second is to stop the transit. And the third one is to stop the demand. And so the ban on the commercial sale of ivory is the third one, stopping the demand. And as I said, last year we announced that both of us were going to implement regulations that would effectively ban the commercial sale of ivory. Ours are just about ready to be rolled out. Chinese are working on theirs. We're hoping to get a little more specificity on when those will be actually implemented. We know they're working very hard on it, however. And then we are also talking about how can we work together, because we both have presences in Africa, and we're partnering with the countries in Africa who are trying to stop the poaching, to work with those countries and make sure that we are kind of pooling our energies to work with those countries so that we can actually achieve that piece. And then we're also working together on the transit piece, which is everything from, tracking systems to working with both of our respective private sectors on what they can do to better inspect their cargoes, et cetera.
The MOUs that you reference are, I think, illustrative of a real increase in cooperation between the PLA and the Pentagon, and the degree of communication and, in some instances, practical cooperation, whether it's at the Gulf of Aden and anti-piracy operations, or whether it's China's participation in exercises like the Rim of the Pacific exercise, further illustrates that. I would defer to the Pentagon in providing an analysis on the status of the implementation of the 2 MOUs, but I think the question that we'd like to try to answer in the course of the Obama administration is whether we can't expand the scope of cooperation and establish broader frameworks beyond what we have with the Navy and with the Air Force. But the short answer is that partly as a result of the CBMs and partly as a result of the expanded dialogue between our two militaries, I think there is a strategic stability in U.S.-China relations that didn't exist when President Obama took office.
Thanks, everybody. We've got to get our briefers on their way. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Man, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Okay, I've got just a couple things at the top, and then we'll get right at it. On Bahrain, the United States is deeply concerned by the sentencing of the Secretary General of Al Wafiq Society, Sheikh Ali Salman, to 9 years in prison on charges of public incitement and hatred. We believe that no one should be prosecuted or imprisoned for engaging in peaceful expression or assembly. We understand now that another appeal may be available in this case, and we strongly urge the government of Bahrain to abide by its international obligations to respect and protect freedom of expression, to reject these charges against Sheikh Ali Salman, and to release him. Opposition groups that peacefully voice criticism of the government enable the development of inclusive, pluralistic states and societies. We do not believe that yesterday's decision helps foster reconciliation in Bahrain, and we urge all in Bahrain to take the concrete steps necessary and needed to build confidence and to create a climate where meaningful reconciliation is possible. Now, a brief scheduling note. Tomorrow, the Secretary will celebrate the start of National Ocean Month by meeting with some high school students at Montgomery Blair High School in Silver Spring, Maryland, to discuss ocean protection. He'll be joined there by Dr. Marcia McNutt, marine geophysicist, that's a tough one to say, and President-elect of the National Academy of Sciences. Students will include the Chesapeake Bay regional champions of the Ocean Science Bowl and the winners of the National Science Bowl. He's, as you know, Secretary, very passionate about achieving meaningful progress on ocean issues and about inspiring the next generation of leaders. In the coming months, he and his team will continue their efforts to address the problems facing our ocean, including in September, as you've already talked about here in the briefing, when the Secretary will host the third Global Our Ocean Conference right here at the State Department, and we're very much looking forward to that. Matt?
To start with Bahrain, since you talked about your deep concern about this sentencing, there was some, at least semi-good news out of Bahrain today. They followed through on the release of the woman who had been detained and who they had promised to release when the Secretary was there. Do you have anything to say about that?
We're certainly aware of the reports of her release. We refer you to the government of Bahrain for additional information, but as you know, we've consistently raised her case, so we welcome the news and the reports.
All right, and then a similar situation, except this time involving Americans, the El Dorado case in UAE, where they were acquitted, but then led away in handcuffs and remain in jail. What do you guys have to say about that? Is this the Emiratis keeping in line with the spirit of an acquittal?
Well, first I'd say we welcome the court's decision, and we're pleased that they're going to be reunited with their families soon.
Are they?
That's our understanding, and our embassy officials were present when the verdict was announced. So we're going to stay in contact, as we have with UAE officials, about the next steps. We're going to continue to track the case closely and continue to provide all the possible and necessary consular
Well, what's your understanding of why they're still in custody if they were
I don't
acquitted?
have an explanation for why, even after
Well, did the
the
people
court's
who were
decision, they're still in custody, but we are given to understand that they will be released soon and
yeah,
reunited with their
did
families.
they ask?
Did who ask?
Well, I'm not expecting you to have asked, since yesterday you're not there, and you were presumably off yesterday. But I mean, were the people from the embassy or in the court ask either the court or the police or the Interior Ministry
I don't know if a
or whatever,
specific question
why
was asked
they
by
were
embassy
hauled off in
personnel.
cuffs?
Embassy personnel were present. I don't know if they specifically asked about why they were taken off in handcuffs, and and continued some detention. I will say, though, without getting into great detail, that we are tracking this case very closely. We're in direct touch there in country with UAE officials, and we're going to stay in touch with
But
them.
that is like, that's statement itself is contradictory. You said you're monitoring the case closely and you're in close touch with the Emiratis, but you can't say whether you've talked to them about why they haven't been released after their.
I didn't say that we haven't talked to them about it. We are staying in close touch with UAE officials about this, and we're going to continue to track this case closely to see that they get reunited with their families. What I said to Matt was, I don't know if a specific question was made at the court's
okay.
decision,
Well,
or a
but it
request was
has
made
been
by
made
U.S. Embassy
subsequent-
officials.
But it has
I
been
won't-
made
I
subsequently.
won't talk about the details, but I can tell you we remain in close touch with UAE officials.
Can I ask about another American? Well, actually, I just want to. There's another American that's been arrested in the Gambia. Fanta Darbo Jawara apparently was taking part in a peaceful protest and was arrested and beaten on April 16th. Sounds like her family has some connections to the opposition, and that's why she might be held. Do you have anything on this?
I don't, I'm afraid. You're
Could
going to have
you,
to let me look into that
yeah,
one. I
Appreciate
got
it.
other,
I'll give,
other
Liz-
situations,
yep.
but I don't, not aware of
Got it.
that one, so you're going to have to let me take that.
Can we go to the travel alert that was issued for Europe?
Yeah.
Do you have any specific threat information about specific targets in Europe, or not?
This was based, the travel alert you're referring to, let me just back up a little bit. It was a renewal that was we have to do these every 6 months, so this was a renewal. It was, this one was, obviously it would have come anyway, but we took the opportunity, since it's the beginning of summer, to make our concerns known about the potential risk of terrorist attacks throughout Europe, particularly when you've got, the Tour de France starting up, you've got this European Football Championship, and of course the World Youth Day, all of which is happening in June and July. So it was a good opportunity to put all this into perspective. And I'm not aware of any specific credible terrorist threat around these events or in any particular place in Europe. This alert was issued just as they always are, based on accumulation of information. And what we know continues to be an interest by terrorist groups to conduct attacks against Western targets, and Americans specifically in Europe.
And one other one on this. The last such continent-wide alert for Europe was issued on March 22nd after the Brussels airport
That's
and
right.
metro attacks. And that was scheduled to expire, I think, on June 21st or 22nd.
That's
There
right.
was a, yeah?
That's right.
So are you saying that this is a renewal of that? Because you didn't specify it. Normally you specify in alerts, this is a renewal of such and such, which is our way of understanding that this is basically just renewing something, not something new based on new or different
Well,
information.
it's both, actually, Arshad, as I understand it. It is a renewal. You're right, that one wasn't due to expire until later in June, but come about the third week of June, we start to have some of these events happening. So I think, given the situation in Europe, given the potential risk, the department felt it was prudent to go ahead and renew this one a little early.
Okay, got it.
And that's really all that was here. It was just an administrative decision to try to get this information out to Americans that are
You
traveling
were
abroad.
just pointing to these three upcoming events
As-
as examples.
As examples of large-scale, widely attended public events that, that we know have been attractive to terrorists in the past. That doesn't mean we have any specific credible threat to any one of them, but this seemed to be the wise and prudent course. So that
Are
we
you
can keep
advising
information
Americans to
flowing.
stay away from these events, or simply to
not
be
at all.
vigilant?
Not at all, just to stay vigilant. We're certainly not discouraging travel to Europe or other tourist destinations or even these events. Just that we want to make sure that, that they stay vigilant, that they stay aware as they attend or they travel.
All of that is fine, but, it's not as if these three events that you mentioned were just put together and, organized over the course of the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks, or even 1 week. You knew about them when the March one came out, and yet the March one doesn't mention any of these.
Well, the March one was specifically issued in,
Right.
in response to
Well,
the
it's
the
hard for
Brussels
people
attacks.
to, here's the thing, it's hard for people to understand that, to understand why you would do this without specific or credible threats to those three events when, as has been pointed out, an alert for Europe has already existed for less than 6 months. You knew that these events were coming up, and you're specifically mentioning them in this one
Yep.
today. So, I mean, that's, I think that's where that question's coming.
I'm not,
Say you were renewing it, oh boy, you would say this is an early renewal of such and such, so people understood that it was just a continuation.
well, look, I can't get to I can't speak to the specific rhetoric that was used in terms of drafting it, but it would have been, we believe, irresponsible and imprudent not to take into account some of these large-scale, widely attended events this summer. And to just let the other one lapse until June 21st, when some of these events may already be starting, didn't seem very wise either. So there's no apology to be had for trying to get ahead of summer events. There's no regret, there's no remorse, there's
no.
there's-
It's
there's
just
no-
an explanation. If you don't have any specific and credible threat to
We
these
issue
things that you
alerts
knew.
all the time that aren't
I
based
know.
on specific credible attacks. I think we would and should come under a greater scrutiny if we had not issued a travel alert as the summer begins there in Europe. We absolutely don't want to discourage travel or tourism to Europe. The Secretary has said himself, even in the wake of the Brussels attacks, that he would want and would hope that Americans continue to travel abroad to see the great sights of the world, to attend these kinds of events. We just want them to be aware and to be vigilant.
John,
Yeah.
I want to go to Syria, but could I just have clarification on Bahrain, where you began at the top? There was also sentences of 11 activists where they stripped them of citizenship under some dubious allegations that they smuggled arms to Saudi Arabia and so on, and some sort of connection with Iran. Did you also mention that? Did you?
I don't have, I don't think I have anything on that. I keep hitting that mic, I'm sorry about that. No, I'm afraid I don't have anything on that
No
one.
problem. Okay, let me go on to Syria. The Russians denied that they had any role or that they're responsible for the bombing in Idlib. Do you have any comment on that?
We're still looking into what happened in Idlib. We don't have a great sense of complete knowledge here about who was responsible. Obviously, the images coming out of Idlib are very troubling. Obviously, the killing of innocent civilians is a violation of the cessation of hostilities, period. We're going to continue to work closely inside the cessation of hostilities task force with the Russians to try to figure out what happened here, and we'll take it from there. But I can assure you that we're very focused on it. We've seen the images, same as you. And we're going to do what we can to get to the bottom of it.
Now, last week, the issue of Ahrar Sham was discussed rather thoroughly here in the briefing room and their role and so on. At week's end, they claimed responsibility for doing the bombings in Tartus and Latakia and other places and so on. Does that in any way places them, in your opinion, as much as Jabhat al-Nusra and others who commit these kinds of terrorist acts?
I've seen the claims of responsibility. As we said at the time, the attacks were deplorable and unacceptable. That's still the case today. And as you know, one coming out of Geneva this last time, the ISSG agreed that they would more assertively look at persistent violations of the cessation and would not be, at a point that's appropriate, averse to rendering ineligible to the cessation a group or a force that consistently and persistently violates it. I don't believe that such a rendering has been done in this particular case, but I can tell you that we're going to continue to look at this and the actions of this group going forward.
So my last
Vienna,
question.
I'm sorry, I said Geneva. Thank you for the correction. Vienna.
My last question on this. So if they do the same things that Jabhat al-Nusra does, if they espouse the same kind of ideology, at one point will you sort of categorize them or designate them as a terrorist organization and perhaps should be,
I don't want to get ahead.
targeting them should be exempted
I'm really not good at hypotheticals, and I don't want to get ahead of decisions that haven't been made, but I will go back to what was decided, again in Vienna, that if a group consistently and persistently violates the cessation, puts innocent civilians at risk, then the ISSG will take it up as a matter and could determine that that group is no longer a party to the cessation. And they do that at their own peril, groups like these that make these decisions. So I don't know that we're at such a point with this group right now, but I'm certainly not going to rule anything in or out going forward. I mean, it's up to the groups that are party to it to live up to their obligations, and if they don't, over time, there'll be repercussions for that.
Right now, does the targeting of the group constitute a violation of the cessation of hostilities
The targeting of,
that specific group, Ahrar al-Sham?
yes, because they are still party to the cessation of hostilities. Yes.
I
Pam.
have a number of questions on Turkey. May I?
Before we go to
Oh, sure.
Turkey, let me just,
Okay.
before we go to Turkey.
Staying in Syria. Tomorrow's June 1st. Earlier this month in Vienna, Secretary Kerry, speaking on behalf of the ISSG, said as of June 1st, the group would urge the World Food Program to start airdrops and air bridges. He named 13 besieged communities that could be recipients. First of all, what's the status of that effort?
Well, the humanitarian assistance is still not flowing satisfactorily. We're still seeing obstructions put up by the regime to the delivery of food and water and medicine and supplies. It is now going on, 10 o'clock in Syria. I'm mindful of the calendar, and so I think it's safe to assume that come tomorrow, the ISSG will start preparing for the necessity of airdrops and air bridges. And we would expect the regime to facilitate or not interfere with those steps.
So would the drops and bridges start tomorrow, or does the effort to do them down the road start? And then secondly, since it seems like at some point you'd need some kind of consent from the regime to go into some of these areas, have you received that consent?
I'm not aware that any consent, as you put it, has been received, and I don't, again, I don't want to speak for the World Food Program here, but what I said is, come tomorrow, we would expect to start preparing for these airdrops. I don't know that would mean specifically you're going to see one tomorrow, but believe me, everybody is certainly aware and has the same sense of urgency about the desperate need of the Syrian people. So I just don't know when they would begin, and I wouldn't speak for the World Food Program in that regard.
Are all of the communities that were mentioned in Vienna earlier this month still considered candidates for the airdrops, or has the situation improved in some of those communities that were named?
I don't have I don't know of any, let me put it this way, I don't know of any change to the list of communities. And look, nobody's happy about where we are right now on May 31st. So I can't imagine that any of those communities would be suddenly yanked off the list, because we know over the course of these many weeks that the humanitarian assistance hasn't flown or hasn't flowed, pardon me, with any sense of regularity or consistency, and the regime continues to throw up roadblocks. And this is an easy thing for the regime to fix, because it's much easier to get aid in on the ground. So with literally the stroke of a pen, the Assad regime could fix the situation and let these people eat, and let them drink water, and let them get access to medicine. Airdrops are not the preferred method. It's more expensive, and you can't necessarily cover the widest population through airdrops. It's not the best way to do this. But the ISSG is committed to moving forward as they committed to doing in Vienna. So we'll see where it goes.
Follow up on this. In your initial statement, you said that the ISSG would be prepared. You would expect them to start preparing tomorrow for airdrops and air bridges. Can you explain the difference? Am I correct that an airdrop is just you drop stuff, and air bridge is where you have planes taking off and landing and depositing stuff after landing and then taking off
Yeah,
again?
I mean, the
and get more stuff?
airdrop is the physical act of an airplane delivering material from the sky. The air bridge is the infrastructure and the mechanisms, the airspace, the logistics piece that allows that to happen.
But it doesn't imply aircraft actually landing in any of these places to deliver the stuff.
No. This would be airdrops.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the air bridge is it's the facilitation of the airdrops.
So I'm excluding people from the ISSG, excluding people from the cessation of hostilities. Does that apply to the government? Because it seems to me that the United States and its allies have accused the regime of consistent and persistent violations ever since this thing began in the first place. So, is it within the ISSG remit to exclude the regime from the truce, or because they're an integral party to it, do they get a pass? And basically,
No, they're not.
with no consequence.
No, they're not getting a pass.
So how have they been punished?
Well, I
for their
mean,
violations
first of all,
today?
it's in some areas of Syria where the cessation still holds. It's the opposition that's holding back from fighting the regime, and so the implication would be if the regime was no longer a party to the cessation, then the opposition would be within their rights, if so determined, then to renew that fighting.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the opposition. I'm talking about the ISSG.
I know what you're talking about. I
So
mean,
is it
the
within-
ISSG is a
ISSG
not a governing body.
Does it reserve for itself the right to exclude the Syrian government and its allies from the truce?
The ISSG is a consultative body recognized by the UN. The cessation of hostilities is governed by the United Nations, which has invested some supervisory and consultative tasks to the ISSG. The UN was represented in Vienna when the last communique was drafted, which stated that if a party remains consistently and persistently in violation, it could find itself, after consultation between the UN and the ISSG, it could find itself not a party, no longer a party to the cessation.
And that includes,
It would, absolutely.
those parties include the government?
It could include the government.
Do you keep a scorecard on who's doing the more violations? I mean, is it the government or each of the hundreds of the opposition groups and so on?
What I can
Or
tell
are
you
they
is
lumped
that
together? How do you do it?
Folks, we talked about this before. The task force continues to analyze information and collect it as best they can. As you know, some of the information comes from parallel sources and means, so sometimes you get, 6 or so reports, but it's about one event. They do the best they can to share the information inside the task force, which is chaired by the United States and Russia, and then to use that information to try to put the appropriate amount of influence and pressure on the groups that are violating to stop violating. The regime has continued to be a violator of the cessation of hostilities, and we continue to call on Russia, which has the most influence of anybody on the regime, to get them to stop.
The 1st of June date has been known about since we came out of Vienna. Couldn't we have prepared the airdrops while we're waiting, since there was no sign of the embargoes around these towns being lifted, and then
The question
start it
presumes
from
that
tomorrow?
nobody's been thinking about it since the Vienna, and that's not true.
But you said you were expecting preparations to begin tomorrow.
Right.
Couldn't preparations have begun already?
Theoretically, I suppose, yes, Dave, but the point was that we wanted the aid to get delivered over the last couple of weeks. And so the focus was on trying to work to get ground delivery of aid. That doesn't mean that anybody hasn't been thinking about it. What I'm saying here is that, come tomorrow, we're obviously not going to see a radical turnaround in the next few hours. We're going to have to start, the more active preparation to get these airdrops in place. That was always, but Dave, I understand the semantics here. That was always the point. The point was to try to give some space, physical and otherwise, to the process to allow for humanitarian access to get going by the end of May. Clearly, that hasn't happened in a satisfactory way, so we're going to move forward.
But the point of stating a date, June the 1st, was presumably to focus minds. And as of tomorrow, we won't know when the date is that we're losing focus.
Nobody's losing focus on it, Dave, and I can't tell you.
What date should I
can't
focus
speak
on?
I can't speak for the World Food Program. I don't appreciate the sarcasm in your question. I don't know. I can't speak for the World Food Program and when they'll start. But I can tell you everybody shares the same sense of urgency, and we're going to get after this just as soon as possible. But the important thing is that this is not the preferred method to do it. It would have been much better for the people of Syria, and frankly for the entire effort, if enough ground access had been given to the people in need. Yeah. Yeah.
So once these airdrops start, like, what is the U.S. role in that process? Just support through the ISSG body, or?
If you're asking for a military component,
No,
I don't
I'm
know.
I'm just trying to like understand what we should be watching for in the next like few days.
I think you can expect it to go similar to how airdrops have happened in the past, and they have happened. The World Food Program has flown them, and successfully. And I think the way it would look going forward is just like that, where certainly the U.S.-led coalition would be monitoring these drops as best we can. I'm not aware of any direct military support role. I'd refer you to my colleagues at the Defense Department for that. But we have done this in the past. It has been successful in the past, and we'll look to support the World Food Program as best we can going forward.
Iraq.
Let me stay on Iraq and then we'll go to Turkey.
Thank you. So the Iraqi Kurds have said that they're that they're sending a delegation to Baghdad to start negotiations on their independence referendum. I just wonder whether the United States has a position on these kind of negotiations.
Our position on Iraq hasn't changed. We still believe in a federal, pluralistic, whole Iraq. Nothing's changed about that.
On negotiations between Baghdad and Erbil over the possibility of
that's an internal matter for Iraqi politicians to discuss and speak to. What I can tell you is our position on Iraq as a sovereign nation, whole and unified and pluralistic, hasn't changed.
Just one more. In general, does the United States support support the notion that every people, including the Kurds, have the right to self-determination?
I think I've answered the question. I'll happily repeat it again. We believe in a whole, unified, pluralistic Iraq.
Not just in general, like the right of self-determination. What's the U.S. position? I know this is a Woodrow Wilson idea that every people does have the right to self-determination.
Well,
do you still
I don't think
stand
he's
by
president
that?
anymore.
No, do you still stand by it?
Look, I'm not going to get into a philosophical discussion about self-determination up here. We take issues around the world, and nation states around the world, and non-state actors case by case. You have to have that kind of agility and flexibility going forward, in today's very dynamic environment. And again, I can only tell you what our policy is on Iraq, and that hasn't changed.
Just one more, on a different subject, sorry. There were some media reports, including one story actually, not major, in Sharq al-Awsat, which is the leading Arab newspaper, about attempts or work by the Iranian government to build a missile base in Kurdistan, in Iraq. Is the United States aware of that?
By who?
Iranians are trying to build a missile base in Soleimani
I'm not
Kurdistan.
aware of such plans. I think obviously you should consult officials in Tehran for that. That's the first I've heard of this. But let me just go back to a larger point here. We know Iran has had a presence inside Iraq since the counter-ISIL fight has gone on. We know that they have tried to exert influence in there. And what we said at the time stands today. We know Iraq's neighbors are obviously they have interest in what's going on inside Iraq. But to the degree that they are going to involve themselves in Iraqi affairs, it needs to be done with the cooperation, coordination with, consultation, and obviously the permission of the Iraqi government. It's a sovereign country. Sometimes I think we forget that. It's a sovereign country. And the second thing that we've said, particularly with respect to Iran, is if they're going to involve themselves in Iraq, in addition to working through with and with the permission of the Abadi government, that we don't want to see anybody, even the closest of neighbors, involve themselves in such a way that further inflame sectarian tensions, that further make the situation in Iraq any harder than it already is. Okay?
Doesn't the Iranian presence in Iraq far precede the counter-ISIL? Doesn't it go back to 2003?
Oh, sure. I'm just talking specifically about what we're talking about here.
On the Battle of Fallujah, are you opposed to the popular mobilization committees are Hashd al-Shabi, Iranian support militia, of taking apart.
I'll tell you what we support, Saeed, is Prime Minister Abadi's efforts, and this is his campaign. Wait a minute, let me finish. It's his campaign, his strategy to defeat ISIL inside his own country. And I won't talk about military operations, you know that. But what we also support is the Prime Minister's efforts to be as inclusive in the effort to go after ISIL as he has been. And these are decisions that he has to make in terms of the composition of the forces arrayed against ISIL Daesh, in this case in Fallujah. And as I understand it, the arrangement that he has in place will make for the Iraqi security forces to be the ones to actually go in and liberate Fallujah, with the PMF, the Shia militia, as you call it, to stay more outside on the perimeters. And that's a decision that he's making, for what we believe are sound reasons. Mm-hmm. You've been patient. Go ahead.
Thank you. The Turkish foreign minister suggested that U.S. forces partner with Turkish special forces inside Syria instead of Kurdish forces. So Turkey wants to replace the Kurds in Syria. What do you say to that?
Well, as we said before, Turkey is a key partner in this fight. They're a strong NATO ally. And as we do with all our partners in this fight, we're going to continue to discuss with Turkey all the different means where we can cooperate better against Daesh. And those talks are continuing. I'm not going to get ahead of military operations one way or another, but we continue to talk to Turkey about ways we can together, through the coalition, do a better job fighting against Daesh.
Put simply, U.S. response to the choice that Turkey is offering is that you're not going to make that choice. Is that correct?
If you're asking me, are we still going to support Syrian Democratic Forces inside Syria?
They mean Kurdish.
We are.
Kurdish forces. They mean they want to replace YPG with their special forces.
I'll let them speak to what they desire to do.
Exclude
I know. I'll let them speak for what they want to do. What I can tell you is, look, the effort against Daesh is being fought on many levels, not just military. It's also being fought by many different groups, not just nation states. You got 66 countries arrayed against this group right now. That's pretty representative of the international community about how serious the threat is and continues to be. You also have groups and forces inside Syria. We call them the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are not just Kurdish forces. There are other groups represented in the SDF. We support efforts by the SDF. We're going to continue to do that. I don't see that changing in as much as they have been very effective on the ground against Daesh. We also have a strong relationship with Turkey. And Turkey, as I've said many times, this isn't some esoteric discussion for them. It's right along their border. It's real. And we appreciate the support that they've given to the coalition. We're going to continue to look for ways to bolster that cooperation and to try to improve our joint efforts against Daesh.
So, but Turkey wants the U.S. to choose between them and the Kurdish forces. So the U.S. response just shortly and simply is no thanks. Would that describe the U.S. response?
What I would say to the proposal to choose, and I think I've said this before, is that there shouldn't have to be, the only choice to be made is to continue the fight against Daesh. And it does require a true international coalition effort, and that's what we're going after. That's the choice that everybody has to make, is how do you best defeat Daesh?
one more
Sure,
on
go ahead.
Turkey,
All
just
right.
just different. Russia's foreign minister demanded that Turkey withdraw its troops from Iraq, where they're located, without the approval of the Iraqi government. Where does the U.S. stand on the unauthorized troops that Iraq still hasn't withdrawn from?
Same place we were before. I mean,
Turkey still has not withdrawn.
the
from
same
Iraq.
place we had before. We want this to be worked out bilaterally between Turkey and Iraq.
Yeah, well, in January, President Obama called on Turkey to withdraw the unauthorized troops from Iraq. Other than that call, what, if anything, the U.S. has done to make it happen?
We have continually made our concerns known about this to leaders in Turkey, and again, we want this to be resolved bilaterally between the two countries. Nothing's changed about that.
Iran for a second. This will be brief. One, and I apologize because I was gone, as you know, and you were as well. So if any of this has come up before and you've already answered it, please just let me know. One, the heavy water purchase that you guys were making from Iran, did that get completed? Because Mr. Salahi said today that in response to the Supreme Court ruling on the $2 billion, that the Iranians had halted the sale from their end.
Matt, you're going to have to let me check on that one.
All right.
I do
And
not
then-
have an update. Let me just, before was that discussed at all last week while we're gone? No, so
Okay,
let
and
us take that.
Have you guys ever gotten around to determining whether the Russian sale of the S-300s to Iran meets the criteria for sanctions?
I'll take that as well. That said, we've long made our concerns known
Yeah, I
about
understand
this
that, but I
sale,
mean, there's
and as we said, we would, if deemed appropriate, take it up inside the UN. But I don't know a
Right.
specific answer
Well,
to your
there's been
question.
people, people on the Hill have been expressed concern about this, saying that they believe that it is, or at least they would like the administration to make a determination and then take the appropriate action. It's been more than a month, I believe, since the first concerns about this were raised, so
Okay.
anyway, if you could take
I don't
that.
have a good answer, unfortunately, for either of those. So let me take that and get back to you.
Okay, quick one on Haiti.
Haiti?
Okay.
Really?
Haiti. Go to Haiti.
Yeah, the Haiti Electoral Commission has called for the first round presidential results to be annulled and for the first round to be held again. Obviously, this is an internal Haiti matter, but you did welcome the first round results and have in the past called for a quick completion of the electoral process. So just wondering where you stand now.
As we've said before, the Haitian people deserve to have their voices heard and the needs met through a democratically elected president. We continue to believe that they urgently need to complete this process with a democratically elected government to address the challenges that Haiti continues to face. We urge the Provisional Electoral Council to publish on June 6th, if not sooner, the revised electoral calendar establishing a date for prompt installation of the president-elect. Although this is a Haitian-led process, the longer it takes for Haiti to have a democratically elected president, the longer it's going to take for the United States to consider new elements of partnership in helping Haiti confront the mounting economic, climate, and health challenges that they continue to face today.
Sorry, staying in the region, can we just go to Venezuela real quick with the OAS call for a session? What is the U.S. position on this?
OAS calls for
OAS call for an emergency meeting to discuss the situation with Venezuela's democracy.
We join them in calling for dialogue in Venezuela to find the solutions. As a matter of fact, I think you saw the readout.
This is different than the Secretary's call to the officials last week. This is, I believe this is something new. As you know, the head of the OAS is not exactly Mr. Popularity with the Maduro administration, or Mr. Popular with the Maduro administration, and now he is wanting to hold a special meeting which could lead to could possibly lead to Venezuela being suspended from the OAS. If you don't have anything,
I don't know that we have a position on that specific call, Matt, but I would point out that we know we know proximity talks did start in the Dominican Republic, and we welcome that. We think that, as the Secretary said in his readout from his call with the former Prime Minister of Spain on Thursday, that we continue to believe dialogue is the right approach here. Yeah. Where?
For a minute, the Palestinian-Israeli issue.
Sure.
First of all,
Not Mozambique?
Oh, not Mozambique, but I can't.
I am waiting for that question.
Okay. First of all, the conference, and the Paris conference on Friday, Is that, from your point of view, from the Secretary's point of view, is that like a one-time event, or is it something that will be followed?
Well,
What is the thinking of the
but that-
Secretary of State in this regard?
Well, as he said before, Saeed, he's open and willing to listen to all ideas about how to get to a two-state solution, including the proposal by the French. He's looking forward to going to Paris later this week and to attending these meetings to see what possibilities there may be, what options can be pursued. So I don't want to have a discussion that hasn't happened yet, but nothing's changed about our commitment to trying to get at a two-state solution. And if good ideas and alternatives and palatable ways forward come out of this initiative started by the French, well, then that's all to the good.
Because under, go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Does he go there to please the French, or because he strongly believes that something could be done before the end of the administration, given the fact that the main actor, the Israelis, have said many times that they would reject any French initiative?
Well, that's up to the Israeli government to speak to. It's not about going to please anybody. It's about being there to be a part of a discussion and to explore ideas and options that might help us get closer to a two-state solution. Obviously, and the Secretary said this himself, the first and most important thing is that the leaders themselves in the region have got to be leaders. They've got to make some tough decisions, and they have to show in real ways, not just rhetoric, that they're willing to take the steps necessary to get us to a two-state solution. And to date, they haven't done that. So the Secretary has been very clear that he's not going to shut down any avenue for discussion or debate or consideration of ideas. This isn't about going to please the French or anybody else. It's to try to have a meaningful conversation about a path forward.
Yeah. In this case, the Secretary.
Go ahead.
Yeah, would the Secretary take with him what he has, because he's covered a lot of grounds between, August 2013 and the end of March 2014. He covered a great deal of ground. So would he go, from where things ended, or would they have to start all over again? Would he say this is, look, guys, we have covered all this. So
I mean, the Secretary said himself that previous efforts haven't gone anywhere. Again, because there's not been committed leadership there to try to solve these problems. I don't want to get ahead of discussions that haven't happened. So I don't know, and it would be imprudent to try to guess at what point along the timeline of discussions that have already happened they're going to pick it up in Paris, or whether they're going to start from scratch. Maybe it's a combination. I don't know. But if you're really committed to getting to a two-state solution, and the United States policy is that, then it seems logical that the Secretary would want to be there as other members of the international community sit down in Paris and try to solve this and try to come up with some options, so that a reasonable, tangible, and hopefully successful path forward can be arrived at.
It said that the nature of the new governing coalition in Israel raised legitimate questions about what direction it's headed in, what policy directions it's headed in. Today, as I'm sure you saw, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the first time, I think, in quite a while, spoke about the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, saying that it had positive elements, but that aspects of it would have to be changed. What's your take on that? Do you think that the new Israeli government has, by mentioning this, demonstrated or answered your legitimate questions about the direction they're heading in?
I would say we've seen those comments as well. We welcome them. We welcome their stated support for a two-state solution. As the Secretary himself has said many times, the Arab Peace Initiative can play a critical role and advancing peace in the region. We continue to call on both sides, as I said before, to demonstrate with policies and actions their commitments to the two-state solution, and we're ready to support them in any way. So, again, back to the same theme, I think, in my answers to Saeed, the Secretary supports all paths forward that could potentially get us to a two-state solution. But again, it requires leadership there at the local level.
And why do you think this has come up now, so many years after the Arab Peace Initiative was made public, and so many years indeed after Prime Minister Netanyahu took office in his latest incarnation as Prime Minister?
I don't know. I don't know that that's knowable unless, we were to consult Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Two again, very brief follow-ups, and again, I don't know if these have been asked while I was away. One, did anyone ever get to the bottom of that gap in the briefing video?
Not yet, but we are working on it.
Not yet.
And,
So how long does it take to figure this out?
I suspect that very soon we'll be able to let you know what we've learned.
Okay, very soon, like this week?
Very soon.
Like this week?
Potentially this week.
Okay.
Still your belief that what you previously said that this was a glitch? Is that still your belief?
Again, I think we'll have more to say on this a little bit later. So I don't want to get ahead of that. Why don't we just let me get to the end of the process here, and then we'll come back and let you know what we've learned.
And then my another one, again, this is going to be very brief. In the IG report of the emails, which came out while I think we were in Guam, so I didn't really have a chance to look at it at the time, but it mentions that Secretary Kerry uses an OpenNet account. Does he also have a classified account?
Yes, he does.
He does.
He does.
Thank you.
We got time for just a couple more here.
I just want to go back to the Palestinian-Israeli issue. One quick question on the settlement. The Israelis are set to approve the construction of a building in the Arab neighborhood of East Jerusalem and of Silwan to house settlers and so on. Have you seen the report, and do you have any reaction to it?
Well, I think you know our position on settlements, Saeed. That hasn't changed a bit.
I do, but they are not deterred. I mean, your
They're not
position
what?
is not your position is not persuading the Israelis to sort of cut down on their settlement activities, are they?
So we're still looking into the details on this particular report that you're talking about. As you know, the position hasn't changed. We strongly oppose all settlement activity, which we continue to believe are counterproductive to the cause of peace. And again, we're looking for both sides here to do the right thing and to show the right leadership to get us to a better solution. I'll take one more. Goyle, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you.
My question is that administration or U.S. was in the region of India, and now India is coming to the U.S., I mean Prime Minister Modi. My question is, when you meet and greet all these countries, neighboring Indian countries, do you ever talk about India like this on this visit in Southeast Asia? Ever India came up?
When we meet with Indian officials, do we talk about India?
Vietnam, South Korea, Japan. And
Oh,
all
look,
these
I mean,
countries?
there's no question that in routine meetings, bilateral meetings with Indian officials, we talk about all manner of regional, even global issues. They're not just about issues between the United States and India, and we look forward to the Prime Minister's visit, and we want it to be successful. Guys, I got to go. Thank you.